Warning: do not watch this alone. What you are about to hear is not an ancient myth. It is not a movie legend. It is a place that was sealed on purpose, because something inside was never meant to be disturbed, and once it was, people started dying. The Great Pyramid of Egypt, over 4,500 years old, the oldest surviving wonder of the ancient world, built not as a monument, but as a barrier. You see, the ancient Egyptians believed that death was far from the end. They understood that a tomb was never truly empty. They knew certain places were guarded by forces meant to punish any intruders who dared to trespass. Their sacred texts, their hieroglyphs, they warned of this. They spoke of a creeping sickness, of a madness that would take hold of your mind, and of sudden, inexplicable death. But for centuries, most of those warnings were ignored. They were dismissed as simple superstition, the folklore of a forgotten age. But the truth was far more terrifying. The Great Pyramid isn't just a structure of stone and sand. It's a testament to ancient knowledge we've long forgotten. A complex labyrinth designed to protect something far more valuable than gold or jewels. It was meant to contain a power, an entity, something that was never meant to be released into our world. Imagine standing at its base, looking up at 2.5 million blocks of stone, each weighing more than an elephant. The sheer scale is impossible to comprehend. How did they do it? What technology, what understanding of physics and engineering did they possess? Modern science still struggles to provide a definitive answer. Some theories suggest advanced machinery, others point to forgotten techniques of leverage and manpower. But what if the answer isn't about how they built it, but why? What if every single stone was placed with a specific purpose, a ritualistic intent, to create a seal not just against robbers, but against something that could not be killed? A prison, masquerading as a tomb. Ancient texts are filled with references to protective spells, curses laid upon the tombs to protect the pharaoh's eternal rest. But the warnings associated with the Great Pyramid were different. They were more specific, more visceral. They didn't just promise bad luck. They promised a physical and mental decay for anyone who broke the seal. Long before Western explorers arrived with their maps and their dynamite, the local workers knew the truth. They held a deep, ancestral respect for these sacred places, and they refused to enter certain chambers. It wasn't because they feared a structural collapse or getting lost in the dark. It was because of what they felt inside. They described a crushing pressure on the chest, as if the weight of the pyramid itself was pressing down on them. They reported hearing whispers in rooms that had been sealed for millennia, faint voices echoing from the stone, and most unnervingly, they spoke of the constant sensation of being watched from the walls themselves, as if unseen eyes were following their every move. Some even claimed the very air felt different, that it was heavy, thick, and alive. Of course, the Western explorers of the 19th century dismissed these accounts. To them, it was just the primitive fear of uneducated locals. They saw the pyramid not as a sacred place, but as a treasure chest waiting to be cracked open. Armed with a sense of superiority and a thirst for fame and fortune, they went in anyway. They blasted through ancient doorways, pried open sarcophagi, and documented their findings with a cold, scientific detachment. They believed they were uncovering history. They had no idea they were unleashing it. They ignored the unease of their guides, laughed off the stories of vengeful spirits, and pushed deeper and deeper into the pyramid's silent heart. They were about to learn that some warnings should be heeded, and then the deaths began. In the late 1800s, a disturbing pattern started to emerge. Multiple explorers, fit and healthy men in the prime of their lives, fell violently ill shortly after entering newly opened, sealed burial chambers. The symptoms were bizarre and terrifying. They would develop sudden, raging fevers that no medicine could break. They suffered from vivid hallucinations, seeing monstrous figures and hearing disembodied voices that tormented them. Their bodies gave out with shocking speed, leading to sudden organ failure. Between the years 1880 and 1900, at least 9 deaths were quietly linked by locals to these tomb disturbances. Officially, The causes were listed as tropical diseases or food poisoning. The newspapers back in Europe and America called it a string of tragic coincidences. But the people who lived in the shadow of the pyramid, they knew better. They called it the curse beginning to awaken. Each death was a headline, but the dots were never publicly connected. A renowned archaeologist succumbs to a mysterious fever. A wealthy sponsor of an expedition suffers a fatal stroke just days after handling an artifact. A photographer develops a skin condition that baffles doctors, passing away in agony. Separately, they were tragedies, but together, they formed a chilling narrative. The locals whispered that the pharaoh's guardians were finally taking their revenge. They warned that these men had not just disturbed stones, but had broken a sacred covenant. The curse wasn't a myth you read about in a book. It was real, and it was patient. It didn't always strike inside the tomb. Sometimes, it followed you home. It waited, clinging to an object you took, a memory you carried, until the time was right. The explorers thought they were taking treasures, but in reality, they were taking something else with them, a passenger. Then, in 1869, a story was published that shocked the world. It was called Lost in a Pyramid, or The Mummy's Curse. While it was officially labeled as a work of fiction, many believed it was inspired by real, suppressed events. The story was horrifyingly detailed. It described a group of explorers becoming trapped deep inside a pyramid, their lights failing, their paths shifting. They are then hunted through the claustrophobic darkness by something ancient and malevolent, a presence that was awakened by their intrusion. The book became a sensation, cementing the idea of a mummy's curse in the public imagination. But what was truly unsettling was what came out later. Egyptian guides, men who had spent their lives navigating these ancient structures, quietly claimed that similar incidents had already happened. They spoke of expeditions that went in and never came out, of lone explorers who vanished without a trace within the pyramid's walls. But formal records were never released. These stories were dismissed, buried, just like the men they were about. Was the book a warning disguised as entertainment? Imagine being deep inside the Great Pyramid. The air is still dry, and smells of dust and time. The only sound is the shuffling of your own feet and the pounding of your heart. You follow your map, counting the turns, marking your progress. But then, things start to feel wrong. Explorers began reporting something that defied all logic, something utterly impossible. They claimed that passages felt longer on the way out than they did on the way in. They would retrace their steps only to find that the corridors no longer matched their meticulously drawn maps. Walls that were once distant seemed to close in every time they blinked, the narrow passageways becoming tighter, more suffocating. Some exploration teams would exit hours later than expected, disoriented and terrified, swearing they had never left the first room. It was as if the pyramid itself was alive, a shifting, conscious entity playing games with their minds and their perception of reality. Time and space seemed to bend within its ancient stones. These weren't isolated incidents from panicked individuals. They were consistent reports from seasoned explorers and surveyors, people trained to be objective and precise. They would enter a chamber, take measurements, and upon returning, find the dimensions had changed. A doorway they had just walked through would be gone, replaced by solid stone. A new corridor would appear where none existed before. It was as if the pyramid was actively resisting them, rearranging its own internal structure to confuse, trap, and repel intruders. Some theorized it was the result of disorientation and sensory deprivation in the dark, confined spaces. But others believed something far more supernatural was at play. They believed the pyramid was a non-Euclidean labyrinth, a place where the normal laws of physics did not apply, a structure that was not just a building, but a gateway to another reality, a place that could change its shape at will. By the early 20th century, the stories had become too numerous, the deaths too strange, to be completely ignored. Even the most skeptical authorities had to acknowledge the danger. And so, without any public explanation or official statement, entire sections of the Great Pyramid were sealed off. Passages that were once open to exploration were blocked with stone and concrete, their entrances erased from modern maps. Why? What had they found? What were they so desperate to contain? The official reason given was for preservation and safety, to prevent damage to the structure. But the rumors persisted. Rumors that they hadn't sealed the pyramid to protect it from us, but to protect us from it. And so, the Great Pyramid of Giza gained a new reputation. It was no longer seen just as a tomb for a long-dead pharaoh. It became known as a place that remembers, a place that holds a grudge, a place that watches every trespasser and waits for the right moment to claim them. And this is only the beginning of the story. Thank you for watching, and if you found this intriguing, make sure to follow for part 2, where the curse truly takes hold. Think about the most famous curse in history, the curse of the pharaohs. Everyone's heard the stories about Tutankhamun's tomb, where a single mosquito bite led to a chain of deadly events. But what if I told you the real story is much darker? That the curse wasn't just a Hollywood myth, but a very real, very patient force that followed people home. Today, we're not talking about Tutankhamun. We're going deep into the shadows of the Great Pyramid itself, uncovering the chilling reports that officials tried to bury forever. This isn't a story about ancient traps. It's about a curse that breathes, a curse that watches, and a curse that remembers who you are. The golden age of archaeology in the early 20th century was an exciting time. Brave explorers ventured into tombs sealed for millennia, bringing back treasures and knowledge that would rewrite history. But they brought something else back with them too. Something they couldn't see, couldn't explain, and couldn't escape. The official records, the ones you can find in museums, talk about scientific discovery. But the private letters, the whispered confessions, and the secret diaries of these explorers tell a completely different story. A story of a curse that didn't stay inside the pyramid. It started subtly. After returning home, men and women who had stood inside the newly opened chambers began to report strange changes. The first sign was always the dreams, nightmares, not of monsters, but of endless, winding stone corridors. They'd wake up in a cold sweat, the feeling of dry, ancient air still in their lungs. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like the rustling of sand, but slowly growing clearer. Whispers in languages no one living could understand, seeming to come from the corners of their own rooms. They'd check the doors, the windows, but find nothing. The most terrifying part for many was the feeling of being watched while they slept. A heavy, oppressive presence in the room, making it hard to breathe. They would lie paralyzed, too afraid to open their eyes, just listening to the silence that felt occupied. The psychological toll was immense. Some became obsessed, dedicating their lives to deciphering the strange whispers, scribbling frantic notes, and neglecting everything and everyone around them. They believed they were on the verge of a great breakthrough, but to outsiders, they looked like they were descending into madness. Others simply couldn't handle the pressure. They became reclusive, paranoid, terrified of the shadows in their own homes. And then there were those who didn't live long enough to explain what was happening to them at all. Between the years 1900 and 1935, a dark pattern began to emerge. Over 20 unexplained deaths were unofficially linked to major tomb disturbances across Egypt, especially those connected to the Giza Plateau. These weren't just old men passing away. We're talking about healthy, robust individuals in the prime of their lives. A world-renowned archaeologist, celebrated for his discoveries, suddenly dying of heart failure, despite having no prior history of cardiac issues. A young, brilliant linguist, who had been translating inscriptions from a newly opened chamber, suddenly contracting a mysterious infection that baffled doctors. There was no diagnosis, no treatment that worked, and he was gone within days. And the accidents, they were the strangest of all. A seasoned explorer falling from a simple stepladder in his own library. A photographer developing images from a tomb, found dead from what was ruled an accidental chemical spill, even though he'd performed the same process thousands of times. The coincidences piled up until they were impossible to ignore. But whenever anyone tried to investigate, they hit a brick wall. Official files related to these deaths would mysteriously disappear. Autopsy reports were classified, sealed by government order. Any formal investigation into a potential link was quietly shut down before it could even begin. The message from the authorities was clear: there is nothing to see here. But the whispers among the archaeological community told a different story. They said the curse was real, and it was systematically eliminating anyone who disturbed the sacred sleep of the pharaohs. The curse didn't just attach itself to people. It clung to the very objects they removed from the tombs. Artifacts, beautiful and priceless, were brought back to museums and private collections all over the world. And then, they reportedly refused to stay still. Curators would come in the morning and find things had moved. A small golden scarab beetle statue, locked in a glass case, would be found turned a few degrees to the left. A canopic jar, placed perfectly centered on a shelf, would be shifted to the edge overnight. These were tiny, almost unnoticeable changes. At first, they were dismissed as vibrations from the street, or the building settling, but it kept happening, always when no one was watching. Then came the photographs. Researchers documenting the artifacts would develop their film and find things that made their blood run cold. Blurred figures standing in the background where no one had been. A shadowy hand seeming to reach for an object on a display table. One photograph, taken in a sealed room at the British Museum, allegedly showed the faint outline of a tall, robed figure standing next to a sarcophagus that had been taken from Giza. The photographer swore he was alone in the room. One particularly disturbed researcher, after weeks of documenting a collection of smaller items from a Giza mastaba, wrote in his journal, "It feels like it knows where I am. The statue of Anubis. Its eyes follow me. This is not my imagination." He was found dead in his study 3 months later. The official cause of death was a stroke. His journal was never seen again. For the local people, the Egyptians who had lived in the shadow of the pyramids for generations, this was nothing new. They had warned the foreigners, pleaded with them not to disturb the ancient grounds, but their warnings were often dismissed as simple superstition. To them, the curse is not magic in the way we think of it. It's not a spell cast by a vengeful priest. They believe it is protection, an ancient security system, far more advanced and terrifying than any modern technology. They speak of the guardians, not the grand statues of Sphinx you see, but something else. Ancient watchers, ethereal entities bound to the sacred ground by rituals performed thousands of years ago. Their purpose is simple: to protect the resting places of the kings. They believe these guardians do not chase you out of the tomb. They don't need to. They wait. They attach themselves to you, like a shadow you can't shake, and they follow you wherever you go. They are patient, and they are eternal. This might sound like folklore, but it chillingly aligns with what modern explorers have reported. Even today, with all our science and technology, there are certain areas within the Great Pyramid and the surrounding complex that remain permanently restricted, not just to tourists, but to everyone. Archaeologists, researchers, even government officials are forbidden from entering, and there's no public explanation given. No official reason is ever provided. Just stern warnings and locked gates. Why? What's in there that is so dangerous? The unofficial answer, passed down from one generation of Egyptologists to the next, is that those who have managed to get inside have all reported the same thing. The pyramid reacts to their presence. It adapts. The temperature drops suddenly, compasses spin wildly, and most disturbingly, they hear sounds from deep within the walls, like massive stones grinding against each other, as if the very structure is shifting to block their path. The pyramid, they say, is not a dead building. It's a living organism, and it does not like being disturbed. So, here is a final warning, pieced together from the fragments of journals and the hushed conversations of those who have been there. If you ever find yourself inside an ancient place, a tomb, a temple, anywhere that feels heavy with the weight of centuries, and you feel a sudden, inexplicable wave of fear, leave immediately. Do not try to be brave. Do not rationalize it. Just get out. Do not touch anything on your way out. Don't pick up a souvenir stone. Don't brush your hand against a hieroglyph. And most importantly, do not return. Because if the stories are true, the curse does not kill quickly. It's not a sudden trap. It follows. It learns your routines, your fears. It waits for you to be alone, for you to be vulnerable. It waits for you to let your guard down, and it remembers who disturbed its slumber. Some tombs were never meant to be opened. Some secrets were meant to remain buried under the sand, and some guardians never, ever stopped watching. Thanks for joining us in the shadows. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a new nightmare to think about when you turn out the lights.